So, welcome today to another episode of Silver Service at the Cast Show. Today, I welcome a very esteemed colleague of mine, Clarisse Messey. Welcome, Clarisse. So, for those that don't know, Clarisse is an exceptionally talented PR and strategy communications marketer, somebody who I've worked very closely with at my time at Talent. So, welcome, Clarisse.
Thank you, John, for welcoming me. As you mentioned, we worked together at Talent. I'm a communications professional with the objective of building a strong and sustainable brand. And we worked together, especially on everything related to employer branding and employee engagement at Talent, which has become a very important topic for all the organizations, no matter the industry they sit in.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I know we spent many hours talking about how not only employer brand is perceived in the market, how companies obviously want to engage from an employer brand, and also how to get the most out of our employees, our you know, our advocates, I guess, in the marketplace. But also not only that, I think towards the sort of latter part of our time, we were speaking a lot about how employer brand also affects the change of customers' view on the business as well. So I think, we've spoken on numerous occasions on that. I mean, obviously looking currently at how the market plays out and how things are. What are your kind of insights, I guess? Why is this becoming such a key part for organizations to look at right now?
This is an interesting question, and I think that many organizations are asking themselves that question. Um, I do think that it's very much linked to building trust and confidence with your customers, your consumers, even with the citizens if you are a public service organization. Um, it's if look at what people are doing before they purchase a service or a good. Uh, they they don't today. They don't only purchase just a good or just a service. They're looking at the values of the organization, and as you see it on the talent acquisition side, you see people who don't want to work for companies who don't tell a story
Mm,
with values that they share with them.
yeah, I think the values point, in terms of not only from people wanting to work for the company, but like say the customer side of things, understanding what are the values. Because I think, I've always found that when I've looked at companies that I've worked with as a third party, if they have a good cultural, not even an employer brand, because not every company obviously invests huge amounts of time or money. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to cost a fortune. I know, you and I worked on tools on projects and campaigns that were literally there was no cost involved at all. So, I think it's almost creating advocates out of your employees, but I think actually the purpose behind, I think when you talk about your culture and your values and your mission, vision, purpose, and everything else surrounded around that, the idea of giving somebody purpose in what they do, if you are behind and believe in what the company is trying to achieve, and it doesn't need to be a world changing, you know, business idea, it just needs to be something that is meaningful for people, I think is a really important element there.
Yeah, I agree with you. It should be or it must be meaningful for people. Um, Again, when like when people do business, they won't just select your product for the capabilities, the differentiators compared with your competitors. They're going to value very much the relationship that you've built with them.
Mm.
And I strongly believe that the people component of any business relationships play a big role in the purchasing decisions,
Yeah.
simply because we're human beings. And as human beings, we're also driven by emotions.
Mm.
So when you discuss with a supplier as part of a purchasing process, obviously emotions will play a role in your decision.
Yeah, I think that's one. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's that something doesn't necessarily need to be the cheapest, or the potentially it needs to be the best tool that's there on the market, but it does, I think there are times when you look at a tool, when you look at a company that you're considering purchasing their tools, finding people that are engaged. I think you tend to find there's a lot more flexibility, and they want to help you solve problems. And I think that's a really key point in terms of when not only looking, I know a lot of this podcast is meant to be about really helping people navigate looking at companies, but I think if you look at it from the perspective of a buyer or a purchaser, or a user of that tool, I think being able to sort of see what is their messaging about. If it's all product, 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 then it tends to be, that it's going to be a very structured, very process driven environment to go to. And maybe, if people are looking for growth or development or a culture that is, I don't want to say inclusive, because it doesn't mean that somebody that is process driven isn't inclusive,
Mm.
but somewhere that can be, where you can have impact in something. I think that's also a key point as well. So I think shifting it into the conversation around, how do you feel like, what would your advice be to somebody who is currently navigating that at the minute, doing their job hunt and looking at companies, maybe a company that isn't, again, spending time or
Mm.
money or effort into their employer brand? How do you feel like a company can go into, or an individual can go and look at that company structure and kind of get a better idea?
So I would, you know, um, I would look at the company's website, of course, but I would also look at their social media presence. I would look at any media coverage, any type of coverage, can be videos, and I would try to figure out, okay, what's the story? What's the
Mm,
story they're telling? And if the story is consistent across the different channels. And what's the place of people and culture in that story? If
yeah.
people and culture are like pillars of these stories, if people are like the main characters of that story, then it sounds like potentially a good place. And then obviously, I would look at like ratings, websites. Um, you know, before booking a hotel, you're going to TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
So looking at websites like Glassdoors, and there are many websites that
Yeah.
can give you a good like a good sense of how what's the place of people and culture within that organization.
Yeah, I think Glassdoor is always one that we kind of looked at, and I think it was one of those that, when you look at feedback from those sort of review sites. I think understanding how those review sites work. I mean, Glassdoor is obviously like the de facto one, just kind of like LinkedIn has kind of become the de facto job hunting tool that a lot of people use. It's a case of, I think looking at how those tools are set up, Glassdoor is exceptionally good, but I think looking at it from a lens of, are there former and current employees, posting on? Because if it's a lot about former employees, maybe companies, obviously with layoffs happening, I think at the minute, a lot of companies have had their ratings down. Comparably was a tool that we actually that I switched over to at Talent, because I knew we could still gain the data from Glassdoor, we could still respond, we could still listen to comments from there. But what we wanted people to see from Comparably's perspective was, these have to be people with a Talent email address, or a company email address, I should say. Um, so, I think what you get is a much clearer picture of what is the current environment, rather than maybe Glassdoor, where you get an overall view of how people have shifted, and both are, equally important. For sales, there's things like rep view and so on and so forth. That, like you say, there are hundreds out there. And I think really sort of taking a mixed view of kind of going, okay, understanding from a media perspective, has the company been, announced layoffs recently? Then yes, you're going to probably see a bit of a dip. But obviously, I think if whatever's happening, seeing what are the market trends at that point, I think taking those on board is really key as well. I think, interestingly there, how much do you think the difference between, executive content or versus employee content? What are your kind of views in terms of how can employees maybe get more engaged? If they have a true passion and belief for an organization. And we're going to switch it up a little bit here for people who are actually working in an organization. If they want to be part of this, what are your thoughts on the best ways for people to get involved in helping share that message outside as well?
I think that if people are truly engaged in with their company, and if there is a very high sense of belonging, um, they they will they will tell the story. They
Yeah.
will tell the vision of the company when they talk to customers, suppliers, partners. But this has to be driven by the top.
Mm,
This has to be driven by the executive team. You can't just expect from your employees to tell all the, you know, how much a company is great if you don't set the path
mm,
for them.
mm,
It's impossible. So, um, culture and people, absolutely a C-level discussion, and then you you will equip your employees with the right tools. You will build employee advocacy programs, um, but yeah, they need
mm.
they need some kind of leadership with this exercise.
Yeah, I think one of the things there with when we talk about executive buy-in, I think looking at how people are transparent, and I use that word very carefully because I know from a business perspective you can't always be. I think transparency may be the wrong word, because there is a certain point when a business grows that, of course, legally wise, that there are things that transparently can't can't sit there and share them. I think vulnerable is probably actually a really good term. I think if you've got executives that buy in on, not just having purely polished, videos and content out there, I think from an executive perspective, understanding the impact of actually just picking up your phone and recording something and sharing it. I think that's something that a lot of people take for granted. I think business owners definitely, or executive teams take for granted the impact of doing something that's unedited and just really
Yeah,
sort of off the cuff and vulnerable. I think
uh,
is a really good one.
I agree. And in my opinion, the greatest communicators,
Mm,
executive communicators, are the ones who are able to create that engagement, that level of transparency,
mm,
and that authenticity with the employees, and
yeah.
not with external communications
Mm,
exercise, but with the employees. If they're able to do that,
yeah.
they're at best.
It reminds me of, I mean, there was so many videos that we did with the executive team in years gone by that were just, I think, where people were able to make fun of themselves a little bit, even from an external
Yeah,
sharing element as well. So it's not just, hey, this is, you know, something that is internal. I mean, obviously there is a very sort of fine balance there to be struck. There needs to be that corporate element from a customer's perspective. But I think people who are able to take the blooper reel, for example, and just go, do you know what? Let's put that out there. It doesn't. It's not gonna. It, it gives an honest sort of sidetrack point of yeah, some of this stuff is corporate created, and of course it needs to be. But showing the human side of it as well, I think it gives a really good sort of reachable element as well.
yeah, absolutely. And this is what I tell executives or any
Mm,
spokespeople when uh, they prep for an interview with a reporter. Um, I'm like, the reporter is a human being. You're a human being. Just be yourself. Don't
yeah.
pretend to be someone else. It won't work. And it's particularly true with your employees, your internal audience.
Mm.
You have to be yourself. Again, don't pretend to be someone else. It's going to like look fake, be fake, and you're not going to be able to build that trust
Mm.
between you and your employees.
Yeah. Do you know what it makes me think about on this conversation? It makes me laugh on the fact that it's kind of the same as an interview if you're interviewing a company, right? If you're the candidate or an employer interviewing a candidate, being yourself and not, I used to talk about authenticity in the process as well. Let's lay all the problems out on the table and just so if somebody joins us, they're aware of everything that they're going to face coming in. I think that's where you get people coming in wanting to take on the challenge. But I know we're probably sort of getting to the end of our time, but in terms of one other question I had, you and I worked so closely together over the years. What advice would you have for TA professionals on building a relationship with marketing? I know I've had so many conversations with TA professionals over the years of really that they've struggled to sort of leap that gap in terms of working with marketing to help build content, help build engaging career sites, and getting on board on the understanding of that balance between employer branding and corporate branding.
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, based on my experience, I talk to people naturally, and talent acquisition professionals, they just talk to me because I am fully aware that employer brand must be a pillar of any communication strategy for an organization.
Mm,
So you have to work with talent acquisition teams, HR teams. That's very important. Um, the good news is that today, marketing and comms professionals are very much aware of that situation and they know how much it is important. So I do think that they will welcome TA professionals coming to them to discuss employer brands. So
Yeah.
don't don't expect for the silos to break down by themselves. There is no magic in there.
No.
Because, you know, in like in just like in a love relationship, if you're falling in love with someone, do the first step.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
expect the other to do that step. Don't
Yeah.
be shy and do it.
Agreed. I think equally it's, helping, if you hit that blocker, I think it's from both sides. I think bringing data to the table of helping people understand, because I think there's a couple of bits actually there. So that one of the things that I remember saying to hiring managers, recruiters, and I think the marketing team as well, and everybody who is involved in that, is somebody who goes through our interview process may not get the role with us, but that person could be a potential customer in the end. I mean, obviously we had our nurture platform of we wanted to give people a good candidate experience because what we wanted for them to is to consider roles in the future within the business. But I think more importantly, or not more importantly, probably equally as important, is the fact that somebody might go to a different side of the table and actually, if they've had a bad experience with you, that is a really big sort of potential flag for people going, well, actually I don't want to purchase that tool because of my experience previously with them. So yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's, how people can build that relationship is through understanding that part of the process of how people how everybody is involved. It's not one person in an organization, it's everybody in an organization plays a part in that, and I think that's a big
Yeah,
point for me. So
yeah. I agree. I agree. When you look at the buyer journey, the phase like the two first phases, awareness and discovery,
mhm.
this is where your employer brand
Yeah,
is going to play a very like critical role.
yeah,
So it's important, I guess, for everyone to for talent acquisition professionals to understand the impact of employer brands on the business, and for comms professionals to make more efforts on breaking down these silos between the two
yeah.
functions and expertise.
I think everyone can bring that their own expertise to the table. They can bring their own insights, and again, understanding what is going on from a corporate market perspective to understanding what is going on from a talent market perspective. The two are actually very intertwined as well, and I think are important to kind of look at from a business's perspective to be able to kind of see, well, what do we need to shift on, whether it is from a corporate branding, from a talent
Yeah.
branding, whatever it may be. So
Yeah. And
excellent.
sometimes in some organizations, depending on the structures, comms sits under HR
Yeah.
marketing.
it's it's an interesting structure point. I've spoken with people about this recently of, the shift that I'm starting to see in businesses actually of how talent organizations and HR and marketing and all the different sort of facets within those, how they intertwine now. And I think it's almost like that this, I kind of hope in some way that 2024 or 2025 is like this birth of like the rather than it being HR only, it's that talent, being lifted into the insights that it can bring to a business as well. And I think that
Yeah.
is, it's almost that shift of And when I say talent, it's not talent acquisition, it's your learning development, it's your
Yep.
employer branding team, it's your talent acquisition team, it's your DIB teams, it's your compensation benefits and everything else, you know, that sits within that, that actually just elevates the organization into being a place where people are engaged, people are passionate, and people have a purpose within what they're doing. And actually, subsequently, I think what a lot of businesses will find is that as they adopt that, it will become, they'll see a lot more kind of pickup, you know, in terms of how people approach their markets when, most importantly, times are difficult, right? So
Yeah, that's a very interesting thinking.
probably a whole nother conversation that we should have at some point or another.
Probably.
Well, Clarisse, thank you very much. I'm not sure if you have any like takeaways. What would be your kind of one thing that you would advise somebody, whether it be somebody searching, whether it's a company, what's the one thing that you would want people to walk away from today?
So for people looking for like a new opportunity, um, again, make sure that the organizations that you're searching for make sure that people is not only the main character of the story, but they are writing the story with the organization. So that's very important. And for companies, for organizations, listen, if people is not part of your communication strategy, you're not going to, well, you're going to exist,
Mhm.
but you're not going to build a long-term brand.
Agree, 100%. Well, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll have you again on soon.
Thank you so much, John. Have a
Thank
good day.
you.
Bye.
Bye.